Scottish clubs can be a bit of a mixed bag when playing in Europe. For every heroic result or performance, there is always one where we manage to embarrass ourselves and get fans of lower league English clubs such as Cheltenham or Fleetwood Town calling us a farmers league. Sorry to any Cheltenham or Fleetwood fans watching, I'm sure some of you are a reasonable bunch. So, seeing as I made a video on the best performances, it makes sense then to cover some of the worst results we've seen from clubs who have played in Europe. Now, I should point out a disclaimer. If you have watched that video, then you would know that many clubs have played only one tie in Europe. These clubs are still in this video, but I'm not going to spend too much time on them. Aberdeen, Sigma Olomouc, Europa League third qualifying round 2009. Whilst worse teams than Sigma Olomouc have knocked Aberdeen out of Europe, those instances were done due to away goals or by a really tight margin. Czech football is arguably of a similar standard to Scottish football, if we're talking about club football anyway, maybe slightly better, but that is no excuse for how badly Aberdeen performed in this tie. 14,000 fans would attend the first leg at Pittodrie hoping for at least a draw, giving some hope for when they would go over to Czechia. But after Michael Hubnik put the visitors 1-0 up, expectations were tempered. Charlie Mulgrew would score an equaliser not long after, but it was all downhill from here. Sigma would score 4 goals in the second half to win 5-1, effectively ending Aberdeen's European run before it even started. Sigma would win 3-0 in Czechia, giving the Dons their worst European aggregate loss. As mentioned, they had previously lost to Skonto Riga and Bohemians, but both those results were on away goals, which is not as bad as getting beaten 8-1 in my opinion. Adrionians, Sparta Prague, Cup Winners' Cup, first round 1992. Airdrie only played in one European tie and it was against another Czech side in Sparta Prague. Airdrie qualified after they were runners-up to Rangers in the previous season's Scottish Cup and for their efforts would be given Czech sides Sparta Prague. Airdrie would lose 2-1 in Prague and 1-0 at home, losing 3-1 in aggregate and haven't played in Europe since. Celtic, Lincoln Red Imps, Champions League second qualifying round 2016. I don't care that Celtic went on to win this tie overall. There are plenty of embarrassing qualifying knockouts from the last 20 years which will be mentioned later, but come on. They lost to a team from Gibraltar. It's a rock that people only know about because of some monkeys and butthurt Spaniards complaining about how it's lost territory because it's in Iberia. Just ignore Ceuta, Melilla and a bunch of tiny bits of land bordering Morocco they still own. This was Gibraltar's third year of being a UEFA member, and before this game, the only games Lincoln Red Imps had won were against Santa Coloma of Andorra and Flora Tallinn of Estonia. Celtic, meanwhile, are Champions League regulars and even won the competition back in 1967. 1,632 people would witness Lee Henry Casciaro, who has only ever played and still plays for Lincoln, score the only goal of the game to create possibly the greatest shock in European football. Celtic would win 3-0 in Glasgow and actually go on to make the Champions League group stage. There's no other option for what their worst result is. Other qualifying disasters include a 5-0 loss to Artmedia Bratislava, who are now called FC Petržalka, 5-1 to Neuchâtel Xamax, and losing 5-1 to Bodo Glimt on aggregate. Dundee, Sarted, Intertoto Cup first round 2001. Dundee have an impressive European record from the 60s and early 70s, but after that have only qualified for Europe twice, those being for the 2001-2002 season and then the 2003-04 season. It's the 2001-02 season, however, where we see Dundee play Serbian side Sarted. Sarted nowadays are a mid-table side, but were the best of the rest for much of the early 2000s, so this isn't that bad of a defeat. Dundee would draw 0-0 at Dens, but the Serbs would win 5-2 in Belgrade to see them progress. Dundee United, AZ Alkmaar, Conference League third qualifying round 2022. After an impressive second season back in the Premiership, Dundee United qualified for the Conference League and would end up facing European regulars AZ Alkmaar. Tam Courts, who got them in this position, had left during the summer, so Jack Ross was in charge and things started off well with a 1-0 win at Tannadice. It was a very different story in the Netherlands, however, as after 25 minutes, United would see themselves 5-0 down.
Trail 5-0 at half-time, John, is the tie-over.
2 more second half goals would see the game finish 7-0, equalling the heaviest defeat a Scottish club has had in Europe. It was a sign of things to come, however, as the following weekend, they would lose 9-0 to Celtic and would get relegated at the end of the season, mainly thanks to having one of the worst goalkeepers I have ever seen in Mark Benegitti. Other embarrassing results include losing 7-2 on aggregate to Dinamo Moscow and getting knocked out on away goals by my past 17 of Finland. Dunfermline, FH, UEFA Cup second qualifying round 2004. Like Dundee, Dunfermline have an impressive record from the 1960s, but also have only qualified twice since, both in the early 2000s. 2004 would see the club qualify for the UEFA Cup, where they would face FH of Iceland. And if you're wondering why I'm saying FH, this is an Icelandic team. Their full name is Fimleikafélag Hafnarfjarðar. Yeah, I'm just going to stick with FH. FH would win 2-1 at East End Park, and the Pirates could only get a draw in Iceland, seeing them knocked out at the first attempt. Falkirk, FC Vaduz, Europa League second qualifying round 2009. Like Airdrie, this is Falkirk's only tie in Europe, and it came against Liechtensteiners Vaduz. As mentioned in the best results video, Vaduz are European regulars owing to the fact they are the only side from Liechtenstein who are professional, so this result isn't too bad, but Falkirk had won 1-0 at home before losing 2-0 in the tiny Alpine country. Greenock Morton, Chelsea, Intercity's Fairs Cup first round 1969. Morton have also only played one tie in Europe, and this time it was against Chelsea. Whilst there would be a valiant 4-3 defeat at Capello, Morton would be defeated 5-0 at Stamford Bridge, seeing them lose 9-3 on aggregate. Gretna, Derry City, UEFA Cup second qualifying round 2006. Gretna qualified for their only European tie after finishing runners-up to Hearts in the Scottish Cup whilst being a third-tier side. Gretna, however, would be defeated 5-1 at Fir Park in Motherwell. Their home was nowhere near suitable for European games, and would draw 2-2 in their only tie in Europe before the club folded in 2008. Hearts, Birkirkara, Europa League second qualifying round 2016. You might have been expecting the draw with Petra Club from this season's Conference League, but that was against a side that qualified for that stage and were at least semi-competitive. Moldovan football is also of a much higher standard than Maltese football, where every team is semi-professional, nearly every game is played at the Taali National Stadium because only Hibernians and Hamburg Spartans have their own stadium, and the main island is about the same size as the city of Edinburgh. To any Maltese viewers who are watching, I love your country, your football is actually fun to watch. Hopefully I'll go over to watch the Gozo weekend if it happens again next year, even if the team that I follow, Zamar St Patrick's, were heartbreakingly denied a win against Ulster. So, with that out of the way, in the 2016-17 season, Hearts would defeat Infonet Tallinn of Estonia before facing Birkirkara. The first leg at the Tony Bazina Stadium, funnily enough, home of Hibernians, saw a 0-0 draw, but the reverse fixture at Tynecastle would see Birkirkara take a 2-goal lead before Connor Salmon would give Hearts a consolation goal, seeing the Maltese side qualify for the next round. Hibernian, Malmö, Europa League second qualifying round 2013. Hibs qualified for Europe after losing in the previous season's Scottish Cup final. Hibs losing a cup final, shocking, I know. And they would end up facing Malmö of Sweden. Malmö are also European regulars, and in the first leg in Sweden would see a 2-0 win for the home side. It was a game at Easter Road, however, that would see history made, and not of the good kind, as Malmö would go on a rampage and win 7-0. Leaving Hibs with a 9-0 aggregate loss. A record for Scottish clubs, with the previous record being held by Rangers, who lost 12-4 back in 1960 to eventual finalist Eintracht Frankfurt. A very close contender for this was their 2-1 loss away to Interclub de Escaldes of Andorra, which very nearly falls into the same category of the loss that Celtic endured against Lincoln Red Imps, but you lost 7-0 at home. That's just worse. Inverness Caledonian Thistle, Astra Giurgiu, Europa League second qualifying round 2015. Back to clubs with one European tie now, and we have Inverness against Romanian side Astra Giurgiu. Inverness qualified through winning the Scottish Cup, while Astra Giurgiu were proving to be a force in Romanian football. The Romanians would win 1-0 in the Highlands, and a 0-0 draw would see Inverness out of Europe. Inverness would get the last laugh, however, as Astra Giurgiu no longer exists, while Inverness do. Kilmarnock, Connors Quay Nomads, Europa League first qualifying round 2019. Steve Clarke had led Killie to an impressive third-place finish in the 2018-19 season, and for his efforts was given the Scotland job. His replacement would be Italian Angelo Alessio, who would take charge for Killie's first run in Europe for nearly 20 years. This run started off well when, against Welsh side Connors Quay, they would win 2-1 away in North Wales. It was the game at Rugby Park, however, that would see embarrassment, as the Nomads would score with their only 2 shots on target, with Callum Morris's penalty sending the Welshmen through to the next round against Partizan Belgrade. A game that would see multiple Killie fans turn up, as they had already booked hotels and flights to Serbia.
Booked up for Belgrade and everything! Come on, Jamie, please! Oh no!
Alessio would be sacked by Christmas, and the following season, Killie would be relegated. Livingston, Sturm Graz, UEFA Cup First Round 2002. Another repeat entry from the best video, but not for it being their only results. Livingston in 2002 faced off against Austrian side Sturm Graz in UEFA Cup qualifiers. Livingston would lose the first leg 5-2 in Austria, which is the result I'm basing this off of, but would win 4-3 at Ammanvale, which, whilst a good result, was not enough to overturn the first leg defeat. The reason why I go for this and not the other tie is because that was against Vaduz, and they drew both games, with a 1-0 draw in Liechtenstein, seeing them through on away goals. Motherwell, Sligo Rovers Conference League second qualifying round 2022. Going back to 2022 again, and this time we have Motherwell getting beaten by League of Ireland side Sligo Rovers. Motherwell had just finished 5th under Graham Alexander and would go into the Conference League at the second qualifying round. They would face fellow fan-owned club Sligo Rovers from Ireland, where the league has been on the rise. It was still expected, however, that Motherwell would get the win, but Sligo would win 1-0 in Lanarkshire before winning 2-0 at the Showgrounds.
The last 2 weeks has been embarrassing. Like, really embarrassing. I mean, nothing to take away from Sligo. They deserved it over the 2 legs. They were the better team. But, I mean, I don't mind losing. Fair enough if we lose in a one-off tie, but to get beat comfortably over 2 legs was an absolute shambles.
Graham Alexander would leave the next day with Stevie Hamill replacing him. Hamill would later get sacked after being knocked out of the Scottish Cup by Raith Rovers. Partick Thistle, Spartak Brno Intercities Fairs Cup second round 1963. There isn't any really embarrassing results for Thistle in Europe, helped by the fact they don't exactly qualify for it, with their losses being respectable and against good opposition, and their wins being against lows that you'd expect them to beat. It's for this reason then, I've gone with their 6-3 loss on aggregate against Spartak Brno, who were one of the top Czechoslovak sides at the time, where Thistle would win 3-2 at home, but would lose 4-0 in Brno. Queen of the South, FC Nordirland UEFA Cup second qualifying round 2008. Another case of only having one game in Europe, Queen of the South made it to Europe after losing in the Scottish Cup final and would face Danish side Nordirland. The Danes, however, would win both games 2-1, which, for Queen of the South, who were still a second tier side, is a respectable result. Raith Rovers, Akranes UEFA Cup first round 1995. Raith have had one campaign in Europe, and whilst they would still make it through this round, they were knocked out by Bayern Munich after losing 2-0 at Easter Road, and despite taking the lead, would lose 2-1 in Munich. Seeing as this is Bayern Munich that we are talking about, I thought I'd go with Akranes. Raith won the first leg at Starks Park 3-1, but would lose 1-0 in Iceland, which was a nervy affair for those who made the trip over, but we still went through, so it's all good. Rangers, Progress Nidacorn Europa League first qualifying round 2017. 2017 saw Rangers qualify for Europe for the first time since certain events happened in 2012, and to start this rise back to the top of the European game, they were given Luxembourgish part-timers Progress Nidacorn. Pedro Caixinha was the man in charge at the time, and the first leg would see Rangers win 1-0 at Ibrox, but it wasn't exactly convincing. Still, this is Rangers, and a team of part-timers from a country that shares the name of a province which is bigger than them. Yes, the Luxembourg province of Belgium is bigger than the nation of Luxembourg. They can't put up too much of a fight, can they? By the end of that night, Progress had progressed, after winning 2-0, and Pedro was in a bush shouting at angry fans. There really is no contest, but if we are going to have some honourable mentions, then we can include losing 7-1 to Liverpool and losing 2-1 to Aris Limassol. St Johnstone, Trakai, Europa League first qualifying round 2017. Despite qualifying on multiple occasions for the last 10 years, St Johnstone's record in that time is actually pretty poor. Of these losses, I've gone with their 2017 defeat to FK Trakai of Lithuania. St Johnstone would lose 2-1 at home to the 10-man Lithuanians and would also lose 1-0 away, where Trakai again finished the game with 10 men. FK Trakai in the last few years, meanwhile, have bounced between divisions and have since changed their name to Riteriari after moving from Trakai to Vilnius. Other options from this era for St Johnstone include losing to Alashkert of Armenia, who, like Vaduz, may be small but are well experienced in Europe, and some small club called Galatasaray from Turkey? St Mirren, SK Bran, Conference League third qualifying round 2024. Like Partick earlier, there aren't many options for St Mirren, so I've gone with their defeat to SK Bran from this season. This was St Mirren's first foray into Europe for nearly 40 years, with the Buddies overcoming Valor 4-1 in the second qualifying round. St Mirren drew the first leg in Paisley 1-0 before the Norwegians would come out on top as 3-1 victors, sending the Saints out of Europe. That's all for this video, and of course I hope you enjoyed. Well, maybe not if your team was mentioned, but if your rivals were mentioned, then you probably enjoyed that bit. What would you choose for some of these clubs' worst results in Europe? Leave them in the comments below. Of course, liking, sharing and subscribing are all greatly appreciated, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.